Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt Presti, president of the University of Science and Philosophy. This is the next installment of Interviews, and I will be your host. And joining me today is the esteemed Dr. Timothy Binder.
Yep.
And he was former president of the university for several years, on and off throughout the...
Well, it would have been the very late 80s and into the 90s, from about 1988 to 95, roughly.
Well, there we go.
9 years total, 8 of them consecutive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, you'll know him by his work In the Wave Lies the Secret of Creation, as well as his studies in naturopathy. He's a naturopathic doctor for many, many years, and as well the Fulcrum Magazine, which is available at philosophy.org/Fulcrum. So we're going to get into a few topics here, and we're at his lovely mountain home here in
Hamilton, Montana.
Hamilton, Montana. I was up on the side of the mountain yesterday and was just a beautiful nature that the mountains are, especially in these parts. We're literally on the border of Idaho, so there is one of the largest wilderness ranges left in the United States just to the west of this location.
Largest in the lower 48.
Largest in the lower 48.
Bitterroot-Selway Wilderness, yeah.
There you go. All right, well, we were talking briefly about a few points, and we'll start with the collectivism in contrast to individualism. So where would you like to begin with that?
Well, as we were discussing it, and I loved your presentation on it, and showing the mistakes that especially the collectivist idea results in. And it occurred to me that we really need to see collectivism and individualism rather than a versus, collectivism versus individualism, but as a working unit, and see the truth, at least as each side sees its truth, and so that each side could see the truth in the other side, and it becomes their side, so they're no longer versus, but they see themselves as getting the best and not destroying the other, because there is an aspect of collectivism with every individual, there's an aspect of individualism with every collective, and they must be balanced. Mm-hmm. And they are grossly out of balance now, right, as we can see. And it appears from my point of view, and as well as yours, that the collective is demonstrating the most imbalance because it is the most violent. Mm-hmm. And but not that the far individualism side perhaps has some of that in it, but I don't see it like I see the other in our observation of what's happening, not just in this country, around the world.
Right.
But there is a truth, and in the Russell cosmogony, we can understand conceptually, we will know the truth in it. And then we can help relate it to our brothers and sisters so that we can come to some, hopefully, less violence.
Right. I was pondering this yesterday on the side of the mountain. There are healthy forms of collectivism, if you will, a family unit, for instance, a neighborhood that shares the same values. A nation could be a form of healthy collectivism. So it's really a matter of healthy versus unhealthy, in the same way that an individual can be very healthy, but he can also be very sick, even though he's an individual and retains all his individual traits of identity. For instance, alcoholism, which I'm sure all of us can relate with.
Yes.
Drug use, overeating. Pick one of the 7 deadly sins, and so you have, even within the separation of individual versus collective, you have a separation within each of those being healthy and unhealthy. And Antifa would obviously be a sign of unhealthiness and collectivity. And again, individual addictions and things, afflictions in the individual, which are signs of unhealthiness, even though they're fully, or at least to a degree, realized much more than, other individuals maybe. Many geniuses have walked this planet, given very much to mankind, but have also suffered the ill effects of their own thinking, which are manifesting in the forms of addictions. So I thought yesterday that, being part of a volunteer fire department, it's a collective, yet we're all very much individuals. We don't have to join the volunteer fire department and profess a set of political beliefs or religious beliefs. I believe we even have a couple of Democrats who are in the fire department, and really politics never really comes up because we're all there for one purpose, and that's to put our asses on the line when the community needs us. So how would you say, how does one reconcile with a collective like Antifa, or is it beyond reconciliation?
Well, I think it's possible. I always say even the devil can be saved. Because if not, I'd still be a very, very malevolent devil. And I don't believe I am.
Right.
And but if they could take what I said at the beginning, that I want to see the other side. All of us have a bias, a culture, and our bias comes from our culture, our experience, our education, and that's basically our belief systems, that we need to examine our belief systems. And if I'm going to dialogue with anybody, so Antifa would have to say, I want to dialogue with you, which apparently, from what I've witnessed, they don't.
Yeah, there's been no case yet.
But if they would, because I make it a discipline for myself, I must see if somebody has a bias that's against mine, contrary to, there will be some truth in it. So I want to see it, and I must understand it if I can have a dialogue, because I can't speak to them if I don't understand them, and the same for them for me. So we can attempt it with we should, with everybody. And I think it was Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. I may have got his name all messed up, but that's a good model to follow. I would listen to somebody, let them speak their piece, and I'll tell them what I heard them say and say, is that what I heard you say? If they say yes, do you want to hear my comments? And then they need to listen to me and tell me they heard me what I said, and back and forth until you both see each other's side and point of view. And there will be, I say, because we're all human beings, there will be a common ground. And even the devil, the most fallen among us, can pick themselves up, and the only way you can pick yourself up, be picked up, is to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Right.
Which is to see your own dark mistake.
Right.
And so I think it is possible. And if it was, if you can find whoever it is you're attempting to communicate with, if they will become aware of that process, that can make it happen.
Right. Well, there's those who would say that, and in my own experience from things I've watched on the internet, people have tried to communicate to, I guess you could say, that the collectivist left, especially at demonstrations where they're attacking people of different political belief, and for the most part, there's been absolutely zero evidence that they want any dialogue at all.
Right.
And if violence is their only language, then what is one to do at that point? How is one to think about it? Are they even approachable, and should you reason to the lesser collectivists? Because some would say, for instance, that to even be a part of such a thing as Antifa, you have to have committed self-murder. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be a part of a group like that if you had any inkling of selfhood.
Well, here's where I would come to some response with seeing both sides of this. I would liken our whole world now, and our culture and society in this country, as we are in a state of having cancer.
Yeah.
And a cancer cell occurs because the whole body is out of balance. That means every part that we would still say, well, this doesn't have cancer, the whole body is to some degree responsible, out of balance. And now we have a cancer among us in our body that wants to make everything else, Antifa, as it is. The cancer destroys everything, and ultimately it destroys itself because it eats its host up.
Right. Kind of like the Borg, assimilation.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it will destroy everything. But the reason it occurred in the first place is because the body was out of balance.
Right.
And then, well, putting that in the universal context, I'd say it's a big school, and it's a reform school for all of us. So we need to reform our body politic, if you want to talk politics, and it comes down to even physically rejuvenate the human body so that people can think.
Right.
Because as your body devolves, your thinking devolves.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the way, and if you haven't already done it and put it on your weekly blog and all, when you were telling me about individualism versus collectivism, as far as I was concerned, it was pure genius.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to do that even though I think with our discussion it will have been changed some.
Right.
Because I tried to bring back in, well, we got to look at something that must be in there that is good. Because even the cancer cell in a body that was out of balance, it occurred, and it does want to survive itself.
Right.
While it's destroying everything else.
It's not something that can be ignored.
No, and one of
it screams for attention.
And
right?
Yes, literally
right.
screams for attention. And one of the things, cancer cells can be destroyed by the whole body's immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a little known thing: a cancer cell can revert. It can be saved, like the devil.
Huh.
It can change back to a healthy cell.
So as opposed to just cutting it out mentality,
yes,
it can be reversed.
Instead of killing it, instead of making it commit apoptosis, it's called self-destruction, a suicide, it can be rejuvenated and changed into a healthy cell. Because at one point it was.
Right.
It was healthy cell.
Very interesting.
So, but like I said, I love the way you presented that whole individualism versus collectivism in our present society, because it was so point on, other than what I'm bringing into it here.
Right.
And you need to get that point really out. I don't know if we have time in this interview to do it.
Right.
But the way you presented it to me was what inspired me to say, we got to get this.
Sure.
We got to get this down.
As I garnered from the Russell teachings, genius is, an attribute of a fertile soil where individuality is respected and individual rights. And count all the flaws of the U.S. people that you want to. For the many years that the U.S. has been in existence, it has provided, at least in historical terms, the most geniuses ever to walk the face of the earth.
And we were the most incredible economy.
Right. And
in spite of even it being already sick at that point.
Right. Well, some great points to consider, and this can certainly be expounded upon. We're going to go ahead and move to our next topic. And now we'd like to briefly discuss substance and the nature of addiction. And we brought this up the other day again, either at the table or the coffee shop. Must say there's a nice group of fellas that sit downtown at a dainty little coffee shop, and they discuss the world and philosophy and politics and everything else. Great guys. And I think it was there we were talking about illumination and how, in my studies personally, the greatest illuminations have come to men who experienced mind without substance. So a substance-less experience, if you will, was always one of sobriety. So the greatest illumination stories I've read, accounts, have all come from people who did not use a substance and were completely sober during the experience. And I guess we're going to touch briefly on that. Where would you like to start?
Well, I look at one of my old patients, and forgive me for forgetting her name, a psychologist, and she wrote a book, Society as an Addict, which I'll just take the title of her book as a starting point. I believe virtually all of us have some addiction. It may be very minor. And what is the nature of an addiction? I would say it's something that you use. You could call it a crutch. You could call it something to shade your vision, like monkey see, I don't hear anything, I don't see anything, so don't tell me anything, don't let me see it. There's something that whatever your addiction is, whatever my addiction is, I must look in that dark corner, shine a light of intelligence on it, and then it can dissipate like a fog in the bright sunlight.
Right. As Jung said, shadow work.
Yeah, shadow work. And there will be, with every substance abuse, addiction, there will be something that needs to be faced. Denial must be overcome. And probably the biggest substance abuse in our culture for thousands of years has been alcohol. I would say coffee is I've always said for decades that coffee is the last legal drug that anybody can get of any age. And certainly it isn't as destructive as alcohol or marijuana or crack cocaine or all the various other addictions. And the prescription drugs are probably worse than any of them.
Yeah.
The opiate, the synthetic opiates.
Opioids, right.
And but they all have a common thread, a common root in denial and not facing. And usually these are the traumas, the childhood traumas and they can be adult traumas. And so I can understand, having had them myself, and still I'm sure do some. For years I drank. I would say I was a highly functioning alcoholic. And most people probably wouldn't even know I drank.
Right.
But it was deterring my effectiveness, my creativeness, and actually my ability to even work at a high level. And I don't have that one anymore.
Right.
And coffee, you talk about a gateway drug, they talk about marijuana being a gateway drug to, more dangerous drugs. Well, probably the main gateway drug, which
Caffeine.
I got from you, was Chief Wanadubi, was that? Who said caffeine's the gateway drug. And of course, if you go to an AA meeting and look at everybody there, they are all drinking caffeine like crazy.
Yeah.
And it causes imbalance, gets you wound up to where, I got to relax, so I'm going to have a shot or take a glass of wine or a beer, or I'll smoke a joint, or you fill in the blank.
Right.
And so it could be considered probably the main gateway drug that anybody can get.
Right. And it's thoroughly legal and pushed on kids and sodas and
yeah.
That with the high fructose corn syrup, which is GMO dent number 2, genetically modified organism, you're already off to a bad start, especially these youngsters who are gulping down Cokes and other things.
Yeah, and we should sometime do a session on the vaccines, even though the public attention is being, the light of intelligence is being shown on that. But I had the first case in history to ever sue the drug companies for vaccine-induced brain illness.
Oh, wow.
Which I cured her. She totally became fine.
Right.
Anyhow, that could be another thing.
Right.
But back to substance abuses. So we all have some degree of that, and it's a level of our unfolding awareness. And I had told you one of my addictions, in that I understand them, and I understand people having it, and I can have sympathy. Not sympathy, compassion.
Right.
Sympathy wails loudly and does nothing. I
Right.
think of, and compassion sees what needs to be done and just
Or
does
even
it.
better, empathy, perhaps.
Well, compassion's even better, because if you're going to have compassion, you will have empathy. But compassion sees a problem and just does it. Fix it. I'm going to do what I can to fix it. Doesn't even necessarily expect a reward.
Right.
And sympathy will wail loudly.
Right.
Empathy can feel the pain.
Okay.
But me being an affectionate, compassionate, say, physician, I can empathize with the pain, but I have to be able to function objectively to some degree. Yes, I need to feel it, but I can't let that stop my other faculties from being, so to speak, I'm not hurting so bad with them that I can't think straight. Because usually if somebody's really in pain, they're not thinking straight.
Right.
And, so I can understand through my own experience and understanding the nature of addictions require compassion from all of us that don't suffer from that addiction. And if we've been through it and gotten through it, then you're kind of, automatically you will be in a teacher position.
Right.
If you've overcome it yourself, or seen through it.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, I pounded it down. Hey, I just shined the light of intelligence on it. This isn't fun anymore.
Right.
And what was it doing? It wasn't even fun. So
And what did you say earlier? When you can say I've healed fill in the blank, then you are in a teacher position. So
yes.
fill in the blank, people. I mean, what does it that you need to overcome? So
And if you have overcome it, then you are automatically in a teacher position. If you
you've
choose
earned your
it.
degree.
Yeah, you've earned it.
Right.
If through the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you choose, you don't have to, but you could choose. I will use with my diploma, my understanding
Right.
as best I can, whatever tools I have,
Knowledge.
and one of them is how I got through it, the knowledge that I did. If a person wants your assistance, you're in a teacher position.
Right. Well, you just struck a chord. You said the word substance abuse. You're talking about vaccines, and an interesting dynamic occurred in my mind where people can be abused by others with substance. So,
Oh, it's happening everywhere.
yeah, with vaccines, the collective, again, here we're back to that, which are the typical allopathic establishment is 100% pro-vaccine because that's what they're taught. So literally, those behind the vaccination programs, and we don't have to name who they are, our audience is quite smart and intelligent and know who, the they is, in other words, organizations, government agencies, and other players behind the scene, are actually abusing innocent people with their regiments of 40 plus vaccines by the age of 4.
Yes.
And how would you respond to that? What is a good defense against that?
Knowledge, of course, and awareness, real knowing, and people. I wrote a white paper, which anybody that would, I'm going to get you a copy of it. You could make copies of it, and you could put it on your website even.
Okay.
That gives some unique. The reason I wrote it was it's written for. I have 3 degrees. I'm a chiropractor, a naturopath, and an acupuncturist, and the naturopathic profession has recently. They were supporting vaccines. I couldn't believe it. And so it was written, you'll see in the white paper, specifically for them, but it applies to all the healing professions and to each individual. And I bring up some facts that I hadn't seen anybody else bring up, so I had to write the paper to put those facts in. What is the nature of, first of all, immunity, and what is the nature of an immune response
Right.
and antibody antigen production? And the way I present that, I hadn't seen anybody do. And if you'd want to do, besides putting it up, if you'd want to do a whole session on that, I could go into it. But because I need to rewrite the paper, and I will rewrite it soon and give you, that's more written for the, not just a professional.
Right. The layman.
And even the MDs that would read this need it rewritten because they won't understand homeopathy and what a similimum is,
Right.
what a miasm is, and that needs a little more information brought into it for the average person.
Okay.
But all of these, and then of course I'd look at the people that are responsible for this, who have a viewpoint, and I'd say they're not really revealing their entire viewpoint. And I would say it is at least a mistake, if not an outright lie. And all lies are, the old meaning of the word sin, I think, is missing the mark. And all lies are based upon self-deception first,
Right.
which is turning away from reality. And if you turn away from reality, you don't see what is. And if you persist in that over and over and deeper and more aspects of your consciousness, you become what we call literally crazy, insane. And you'll hear people say, well, look what our world leaders are doing. It's crazy. I say, it's not crazy. It's done deliberately. But they are insane. And it is a mistake. And they have their reasons for doing it. My own understanding would be that they're not telling us. They say it's for the common good, which thus you're bringing it up with collectivism. We're going to make everybody do what we say, and it's who's we? Who decides the collective? Its keynote. What's it for? And it's the one behind the screen that's controlling all of this. And what is their real purpose? And I'd say their real purpose is insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's deliberate, and it's not totally revealed. And
Right.
they invert the truth, and they say this is for the common good. And I'd say the real reason, and there's more, is for the common destruction.
Right.
And
Or they say what? Progress towards what? Progress towards our own destruction.
exactly.
Right. It's actually regression coded. But, double
And-
speak, as they say.
And they these controllers, they don't want you to be aware. They don't want you to be aware, me to be aware. They don't want us to recognize who are we, why are we, and where are we even. And once a person begins to recognize that, then don't get fooled again. New
Right.
boss, same as the old boss.
Yep.
You won't get fooled again.
Right.
And so, the answer for this, too, is knowledge, real knowledge of how the body works in this case, and what is a vaccine, what is an immunization, which I reserve that word for a homeopathic prophylaxis.
Mm-hmm.
And the paper that I want to write more will even get more into it, but the one I have will give you some introduction to that.
Excellent. That's a good segue back into the sheer fact that what is substanceless? Well, in Russell's terms, substancelessness would be the light of mind, which is knowledge and truth. So don't take yourself into a dark path or a dark alley. The minute you tell yourself one lie, another lie will compound and add on until a multiplication takes place to where you find yourself in an unreality. So, which is again a substance. A lie is a form of thought substance that is sticky and entrapping. So you have to literally shine the light of truth, dispense the shadow, go back to the truth and knowledge and simplicity, where you'll find clarity. And in that place of understanding is where you can overcome any substance, because you'll see it for what it is.
And I would say the moment you self-deceive and you turn away from the truth, necessarily, automatically, impossible, you will then deceive others.
Right.
Because you don't see reality.
Right. and as they say, you cannot give away that which you don't first possess. So
Right.
you must possess deception in order to give it away. But as you would with love, same thing.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll move on. Now we'll discuss character building. The Russells, in a lot of their writings, they stated that character was the one way to escape a lot of the troubles, or to move through the troubles that we as a human race have encountered due to the failure of character development. To extend from the first topic of collectivism, I think you'll find in a lot of the collectivist political movements, you'll find very little character. Again, it's a form of self-murder. People who really don't know who they are and don't have the desire to develop character are easily manipulated by others who will give them meaning to their own life, which they have yet to discover. So in that, we're going to talk about what are some of the things we can do that can lead to character development, as well as, looking at how good character can come up with solutions to our current economic situation. So we'll start there.
Yeah, what especially I wanted to bring up, and when I listened to Matt talk, and he's written an article on it, I believe, and you may have posted it on your
Social media.
But it had to do with a way to dispense with the private banking system, the Federal Reserve in this country, the central banks in Europe. It would apply equally to them. And I loved the way you had said that, and I'm going to pull that out of you, I hope.
Okay, I can bring it out.
And you ended with a character and as replacing money, and so I thought this talk, I'm going to try and focus it on character awareness, and character comes out of awareness to replace our money system, our worship of it, our use of it, and the illusion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I thought, when you came to the end of your article that you were discussing with me, you brought up, well, in the end we see it was all character to begin with.
Right.
So
Well, that
you might make a
a recap.
recap on that.
Quick recap on that. I've said this on different interviews that eventually I see an economic model where let people print their own money. And you can print your own ones, fives, tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds, even $1,000 bills. And if everyone was allowed to print their own money, then your money would be valued on your method of how you transact. So if you've got a very good character and you're an honest transactor of business and the business you represent, people will desire to trade with you, so your money will become more valuable. And not because it's actually valuable, but because it's based on character, which is let known through your transactions with your fellow man. So a man who has poor character could have warehouses full of his own money, and nobody would want to transact with him, which would leave him poor in the end because his money would be undesirable. Nobody would take it because they wouldn't be able to get rid of it once they took it. So services with that person and trade with that person, transactions with that person would be undesirable. And at the point when man got so used to working with his own money, it would come to a point of a aha moment in humanity. And this is just, again, my speculation, but or I could say my forecast for what would happen if we were each allowed to put our own face on our own money. We'd eventually realize that money wasn't really the real currency. The real currency was character all along, which would then free us from needing the use of money at all.
Yeah, and as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking, of course, the currencies of the world, all of them, whatever central bank issues them, our Federal Reserve notes, are fiat, meaning they're not backed by anything.
Right, thin air.
They're thin air, and
Right.
It's only because we all believe in it
Right.
and the value that it is set at that our controllers are basically controlling that because they control the markets to some degree,
Right.
not entirely.
We're referring to the international financiers.
Yeah, and our markets, like our local markets, they don't have as much, but it's still our local markets are influenced by Federal Reserve notes, but they're literally not based on anything except our own faith.
Right.
And now people are waking up, and we're going to have some very soon, I think, shocks that this currency is worthless. It's becoming more and more worthless as we see it is not backed by any true character.
Right. Right.
And it's not meant from our own for our own good.
It retains a sort of symbolism or meaning by symbolism alone, as opposed to actual
Well, and even
human value.
coming down to, the way this country was founded, the Constitution, only Congress could regulate the money supply, and was backed by gold and silver, which had some intrinsic value, and even a rock would have more intrinsic value than the piece of Federal Reserve note, generally.
Right.
And and then that was in 1913. Everybody knows this. We got rid of we brought in the Federal Reserve banking system, and then our currency was no longer backed on anything for eventually.
Right, 1933 with the Gold Act.
Yeah, and then they took the silver out of the coinage for the almost 100%
64.
now.
Right.
Yep, 64. But in any case, we need to master money rather than being mastered by money.
Right.
The money masters have mastered us in large part by keeping us subservient in debt. Debt, same root as the word death. Death slaves. And we need to master that and see the illusion and extricate ourselves from it. And what the plans that you have suggested, this one simple one, I know in the Bitterroot here some years back there was an attempt to start the Bitterroot buck.
Okay. That would be a good idea for a lot of, as a local solution for a lot of places.
Yeah.
Should the standard Federal Reserve note become valueless, that could be an option.
And my understanding is our coinage is still U.S. Treasury. That never was Federal Reserve note. And the Bank of South Dakota, it's a state bank that's not the same as the regular Federal Reserve banking system.
Right. Right.
but I'm not an expert there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting topic we just covered.
Yeah. And one of the things I had suggested was that we could print the government, whichever administration is in charge, happens to be the Trump administration, could print 21 $1 trillion bills.
Or whatever the debt is.
Right. Whatever the debt is, just single bills, 21 of them, which you could hold in your hand very easily. Deliver them, declare the interest paid in full, and then write an executive order and abolish the Federal Reserve, but keep the money system going until a currency could be printed to replace it. So there would be no sudden yanking out of the rug other than just removing the intermediaries or the middlemen from the equation, which is much the same in the philosophy of the Russells, that they often said, you know, there's no need to have anybody between you and the Creator. And that, you know, having an ascended master, which Dr. Russell railed on, this idea of ascended masters, you know, why aren't they being hit by airplanes and falling out of the sky in droves? But to literally remove anything between you and the Creator so that you can truly say, I and my Father are one. And you should be able to say that as well with your currency, that there's nothing between you and the use of it, collecting a fee for the use of it. And that's what's led to a lot of the troubles. But it's a very imperfect system nonetheless, and we're entertaining notions, and these don't necessarily represent the views of the university, more or less our personal views, of which we're thoroughly by law allowed to expound upon.
Right.
Which leads us into our next and final discussion on enlightenment. And Dr. Tim, you've been in this business a long time. You've done a lot of meditation. You've certainly proven your worth as a naturopath. And the stories I've heard about and the testimonials, I should say, from people, including myself, who was just recently given an overview, was surprising to say the least, but I felt very much better in the immediate after treatment. And this is all homeopathic. It's very, you know, straightforward. No need for prescriptions or standing in line at Walgreens waiting for a prescription to be filled. Very immediate effects. You've been in this business a long time, serving for the university. You've been in the groups of people. Your shirt says World Balance. You've been to the World Balance.
I created the World Balance Conference with the university. It was for the university in Aspen Snowmass, Colorado, back in 1988, I believe it was.
Okay.
World Balance Action to Save Our Planet, and I still have videotapes of all the presenters, and we should get those if you're interested.
That'd be great.
Yeah, DVD them.
And in light of that, what I was going to give it over to you with is, in your assessment, in your expert opinion of the many years that you've been in this, what is it going to take for mankind to reach enlightenment finally? What is it really going to take? And I know we could say personal responsibility, a lot of focus on selfhood and overcoming the shadow, but just from your own personal, what's the best advice you could offer to someone who's really struggling to develop that self and to attain a sense of enlightenment, which just means getting the weight of the world off your shoulders and getting on with your purpose?
Well, ultimately, the last word you said, purpose, that's all of our purpose, whether we're aware of it or not. And I would look at it this way. I said I'd like to discuss enlightenment and the unique principle. I'm kind of borrowing that from George Osawa, the unique principle. But the unique principle the Russells expounded on. And I have at least four traditions that I've studied and practiced in. The Russells being one, and I'll start with them in a minute.
Okay.
And all of these four traditions, they all, I would say, have the common root, and they all are saying the same thing. It may be saying it in their unique way, but if you look at them both, you'll see, oh my God, it's the same thing.
Right.
So the Russells is one of them. I'm a member of Self-Realization Fellowship, Paramahansa Yogananda, the great Indian yogi. Gone through their home study course and practiced and been initiated into the Kriya technique. Hamid Bey, who was a Coptic priest from Egypt. The Coptics are, historical fact, the first Christians. And the Coptics also believe, as the Russells do, and the Christian church originally, reincarnation was a fact of our existence. There's evidence of it in the New Testament too.
Right.
And so the Coptic and the meditation technique from both the Coptic Fellowship and Hamid Bey and the Self-Realization Fellowship, it's virtually identical, and it's raising the energies up from the lower chakras into the highest chakras in the pineal gland, which the Russell said the pineal gland is a seat of severance of bodily consciousness.
Right.
And then the others would include Far Eastern medicine, and I studied Qigong. I had studied some in the martial arts, Aikido and some karate, but Aikido especially, and the meditative aspects of the martial arts. It's very, very similar, raising the energy up the spine,
Right. The chi.
to higher centers. And when the Russell said the pineal gland, and they have a picture, I think, showing the pineal gland with the centering, is the seat of severance of bodily awareness. That's when it's accompanied by a blinding flash greater than 1,000 suns, as Maurice Buck said, and the Russells quoted him in their home study course, I believe. And Russell experienced this, Lao did, but Walter especially in his every 7 years in his 49th one, whereas he put it, he understood, God took him into the high heavens, he understood in an instant how the universe worked, but then he had to spend several years studying science, which up to that time he hadn't been really interested in, so he could speak the language.
Right.
But in any case, I'd look at how can we all achieve this? I'd say, well, you're in a physical body. And I say, like, if you do practice any type of a formal meditation, I'll put that in quotes. So say you're sitting either zazen or in a chair or however, or you're standing, but you're centering yourself. I'd say all of it really does boil down to removing consciousness from the outer senses. And Dr. Russell talked about being out in nature, getting away from all of the jumble of sense impression we get. I'm putting my own words in there. And he also talked about, I believe, going into his studio was like entering a cathedral, and he would become quiet and seek the source of inspiration. So in any form of meditation, let's say you're going to meditate and I come up and go like this on you, or I start,
Right.
then you're going to find it pretty hard to meditate.
Yeah. Right.
You're going to find it hard to take
Or if your cell phone's going off, or
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
Right.
So they all involve, and I'm taking it to physical health. If your physical body is out of balance, your mind will be out of balance, and you will find it very difficult to stop the squirrel in the cage going round and round and round.
Yep.
And it's when you slow that down and have brief moments of no mind. If you have answers you're seeking, they can come from the source that has all the answers. And also, if you have a question, the answer is in the question.
Right.
If you really
True.
understand your question.
Right.
But so first of all, I'd say get your body healthy. That's a prerequisite step for virtually all of us. We're in these physical bodies for a reason.
Right.
And whether we know it or not, I think if it's a school, it's a reform school.
Right.
And in any case, so you must get your body as balanced as you can. That would mean becoming aware of what creates health and what doesn't. And then you can study various traditions, as I did, and practice them. You can study, the Russells talked about the 1-2 rhythms.
The heartbeat.
Yeah, a healthy heartbeat.
Right. True.
1-2 rhythms are those that will slow our thinking down. And like they said, the waltz that's a happy, but it's a body sensation rhythm. And of course, rock music is even more of a body sensation rhythm, centering on the lower chakras, especially the second sexual chakra. And Diamond Jim Brady, I think the Russells talked about it, he was reputed to have really developed his soul and his taste, I guess I could say, his aesthetic. He listened to classical music all the time.
Right.
And you may have all have heard of the Mozart effect, where
Yeah.
it increases a person's ability to learn subjects.
Uh-huh.
And so make your environment more conducive to being able to withdraw. It's literally withdrawing your sense body awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking it to that.
Right.
All the traditions that I've studied, and the Russells alluded to this too.
Mm-hmm.
And if your consciousness is centered in the pineal gland as a seat of severance of bodily awareness, you're not paying attention to the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And your breath will be slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole body will slow down.
Right.
Yogananda said if you want to know if somebody's a real master, they can stop breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And Hamid Bey, one of his books is a biography on his life, My Experiences Preceding 5,000 Burials. He would be buried underground. His longest burial was for a week in Beirut. So he didn't breathe for a week, folks. And I say that just proves man does not live by bread alone, but by the Spirit of the Creator, which animates all of us.
Right.
As Russell said, all power is extended to us. And it's up to us with our free will to choose how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So balance the physical body, balance the environment, balance your thoughts and your actions, and you're on preparing a very fertile ground for successful, if you want to pursue a formal method of meditation.
Mm-hmm. That's where I'd say that in ancient tradition, especially in Japanese Togakuri-ryu style of ninjutsu, which I studied for 9 years, they had what's called the triangle of life. And at your lower left corner, where you emerge into a body from the womb of your mother, that's the physical. And you traverse for a number of years across the bottom to the other corner opposite, which is your mental. And there you begin to exist for many years to come, several octaves perhaps, before you balance those two. But when those two balance, then the bridge between the physical, the mental, and the spiritual makes what we would call the capstone. So really, to boil it down, you're saying get your physical body right, get your mental body right, and the spiritual will take care of itself, because it has no choice but to emerge when those two things are in a balanced state.
Well, it's nurtured.
Right.
It's being nurtured. And these, of course, I feel that we're coming close to a close here. I'd say what we're presenting here are concepts, conceptual knowledge, and ideas. And the only way you will experience and know is to actually do it.
Right.
If you want to be different, you must do different. But
Right.
it starts with the right thought.
Right.
Yama niyama, to do or not to do. What precedes that is to think or not to think, which results in action.
Right. Or as the Russells might upgrade that, to know or not to know.
Yeah.
But
To know or not to know can result in action, the
Right.
correct action.
Right. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this installment of Interviews. And be sure to visit this website here, philosophy.org. And I'd like to thank you, Dr. Tim,
Thank
for
you, man.
joining us and for your hospitality and all the great things you've done in the past to keep the university afloat, and many great things to come, folks. So stay tuned. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye. And this rounds out our show today, folks. Just a reminder that everything in this universe is unique and different, much like the Devil's Tower here. There's no structure in nature like it in the world. Totally unique, 100% an individual, yet part of the collective mountain range, which I find myself in. We're going to do a whole lot this coming year that is very unique ourselves here at the University of Science and Philosophy. So stay tuned for more to come, and I appreciate you joining us as always. Have a great day, wherever you are.